Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome, everyone, to the Hooked on Movies podcast. Today, we will be reviewing the 2018 biographical crime drama / comedy, yes, I said comedy, from director Spike Lee, BlacKkklansman. With me are Ken.
Imperial tax to become a member, $10 for the year. $15 chapter fee. Robes and hoods are not included. That's extra.
And Ted.
Politics? It's another way to sell hate.
And I'm Eric. Hello, this is Ron Stallworth calling. Who am I speaking with? And
Eric found his pants, by the way.
I found my pants. I took a little hiatus for an episode. I want to thank Justin for filling in for me on Spike Lee's 25th. And it's good to be back, and I did find my pants, and I have a new catchphrase, and you'll get to hear it at the end of this podcast. But tonight, we are talking BlacKkklansman. Ted, give us the particulars of this one.
Okay. BlacKkklansman is directed by Spike Lee. It was a screenplay by Charlie Wachtel, David Rabinowitz, Kevin Wilmot, and Spike Lee. It's based off of the novel BlacKkklansman by Ron Stallworth,
which I have read.
That's awesome.
Good for you.
Thank you.
It has a running time of 135 minutes. It had a release date of August 10th, 2018. It had a budget of $15 million and a box office gross of $93.4 million. BlacKkklansman stars John David Washington as Detective Ron Stallworth, Adam Driver as Detective Philip Flip Zimmerman, Laura Harrier as Patrice Dumas, Topher Grace as David Duke, Jasper Pakkanen as Felix Kendrickson, Ryan Eggold as Walter Breachway, Paul Walter Hauser as Ivanhoe, Ashley Atkinson as Connie Kendrickson, Corey Hawkins as Kwame Ture, Michael Buscemi as Jimmy Creek, Ken Garrido as Sergeant Trapp, and Robert John Burke as Chief Bridges.
All right. What do the critics think of this one?
This is another overwhelmingly positively reviewed movie. The critics score on Rotten Tomatoes is a certified fresh 96%, and it has an audience score of 83%. So both very strongly recommended. Yeah. I was able to find here some little blurbs from these people. I only found one negative critic. Her name was Elisa Wilkinson from Vox, and she said, if the movie aims to make complacent white people feel uncomfortable about their role in the current American turmoil, it fails spectacularly. I don't know what she was looking for. But on the positive side, we have quite a few. Johnny Olkinski from the New York Post, he said, Lee heightens the nervy tone with strong visuals, juxtaposing a 70s blaxploitation aesthetic with the Klan's suffocating suburban decor. The jumps keep you off balance and engaged. Leonard Maltin from his own website, leonardmaltin.com, he said, Spike Lee is an audacious filmmaker who crosses boundaries and deliberately blurs drama and reality. Never has this been more effective than in BlacKkklansman, which defies a number of rules and offers a punch in the gut instead. Peter Travers from Rolling Stone said, Spike Lee's Hellraiser about a black cop who infiltrated the KKK in the 1970s is an incendiary indictment of our current Trump moment and one of the best films of the year. A cinema giant has found his voice again and the power to make it heard. And finally, I grabbed this one. His name was Raphael Abraham from the Financial Times. He said the Klan and the idiocy of their ideology are repeatedly and effectively skewered. I liked that last one. I had to include that last one.
Yeah.
Because anytime we can make fun of the Klan, it's a positive day.
I was thinking about that one negative review from that girl from Fox. It actually made absolutely no sense.
I don't want to disparage any publications, but it's not a real reputable
Movie critic?
it's all internet based, and some of their stuff has been hit or miss.
I think she forgot the movie was from 1978, but
Yeah,
it's whatever.
The only thing is that was the only major publication I could find a negative review. So
That's impressive, just standing on itself there. All right, let's talk about the first time we saw this movie. Ken, you want to lead us off?
This week, for the first time, I've actually owned it for a couple of years. I got it as I had bought another movie that didn't come with a digital copy, and they said, well, they couldn't give me a digital copy of the movie that I bought, but they would offer me a digital copy of another movie, and they gave me a list of movies, and I talked it over with Ted, and we were talking about doing Spike Lee movies eventually down the road, and BlacKkklansman was on the list, so I chose it, but I just hadn't got to it until just now.
Yeah,
So-
no, that makes sense. For me, I saw this movie about a year after it came out. On video, I watched it, and probably seen it a couple times since then. How about you, Ted?
a little bit before you. It was on the run up to, because it was nominated for a lot of Oscars. We don't really ever know how many more opportunities a great director is going to get to win an Oscar, and I was hoping against hope that Spike would win because he's so long deserved it. And then when I heard what the movie was about, this is right up my alley. And anytime you can make fun of the Klan and of course make David Duke look like a complete and utter jackrabbit, it's a lot of fun. So I knew the movie was going to be a lot of fun. So that's when I had seen it. It was leading up to the Oscars.
All right. Well, Ken, for anyone who maybe has not seen this movie, why don't you give us the plot?
In 1972, Ron Stallworth is hired as the first black officer in the Colorado Springs Police Department. Assigned to work in the records room, he tires of being bullied and applies to be an undercover officer. He is assigned to infiltrate a local rally where National Civil Rights leader Kwame Ture is speaking. At the rally, Stallworth meets Patrice Dumas, president of the Black Student Union of Colorado College. While taking Ture to his hotel, Patrice is stopped by a patrolman, Andy Landers, a racist officer in Stallworth's precinct, who threatens Ture and groups Patrice. Following the rally, Stallworth is reassigned Intelligence Division after reading about a local division of the Ku Klux Klan. In the newspaper, he calls posing as white. He speaks with Walter Breachway, the president of the Colorado Springs chapter, but soon realizes that not only did he use his real name, but he must also meet the Klan members. Stallworth recruits his Jewish co-worker, Flip Zimmerman, to impersonate him and meet the KKK members, while he continues posing as white on the phone. Under Stallworth's identity, Zimmerman meets Breachway, the slightly more reckless and unstable Felix Kenderson, and later his wife Connie, and Ivanhoe, who cryptically refers to an upcoming terrorist attack. Calling Ku Klux Klan headquarters in Louisiana to expedite his membership, Stallworth begins regular phone conversations with Grand Wizard David Duke. Kendrickson suspects Zimmerman of being Jewish and tries to force him to take a lie detector test at gunpoint. But Stallworth, overhearing everything on the wires Zimmerman is wearing, breaks the Kenderson's kitchen window as a distraction. Stallworth begins dating Patrice without telling her that he is a police officer. After passing information to the Army CID about active duty members, he learns from an FBI agent that 2 members are personnel stationed at NORAD. Duke visits Colorado Springs for Stallworth's induction into the Klan. Over the real Stallworth protest, he is assigned to a protection detail for Duke. When Zimmerman masquerades as Stallworth is initiated, Connie leaves the ceremony to place an explosive device at a local civil rights rally. The real Stallworth realizes her intentions and alerts local police officers. When Connie notices a heavy police presence at the rally, she puts Felix's backup plan into action and plants the device at Patrice's house, leaving it under her car when it will not fit into her mailbox. Stallworth tackles her as she tries to flee, but uniformed officers detain and beat him despite his protest that he is working undercover. The bomb maker Walker recognized Zimmerman from a prior protest and informs Felix. He and Felix and Ivanhoe drive to the house and park next to Patrice's car without realizing the device is hidden underneath. When they detonate it, the explosion kills all 3. Zimmerman arrives, frees Starworth, and arrests Connie. While Starworth is celebrating the closed case that night with Patrice, Landers arrives and harasses the two, remorselessly admitting to his assault on Patrice. Starworth then reveals he is wearing a wire, and Police Chief Bridges arrives and arrests Landers for police brutality. Bridges congratulates the team for their success but orders them to end their investigation and destroy the records. Starworth receives a call from Duke, and he insultingly tells Duke he is black before hanging up. While Patrice and Starworth discuss their future, they are interrupted by a knock on the door. Through the window in the hallway, they see a flaming cross on the hillside surrounded by KKK members. The film cuts to an actual footage of 2017's Unite the Right rally, the hit and run that followed, and where David Duke is the speaker, and ends with a dedication to Heather Heyer, who was killed in the attack, and an upside-down American flag that fades to black and white. The end.
All right, so this movie kicks off kind of interesting, a little bit of a flashback scene to when Ron first started, when he applied for the position, and the interview. I do like the interview between the chief and I think it's one of the assistants in the police department, how they're giving them all the questions. I thought that was kind of cool.
Our last episode in the 25th Hour, we talked about the actor. He returns in this scene. He's the actor that played Bunk in The Wire with his trademark "she." So that's kind of cool that we get him brought back. But it's interesting because I like what he says to Ron, that, you know, what he's going to have to put up with. And I think that's why they're grilling him as hard as they are, to see if he can handle being put under the microscope, because that's essentially what's going to happen to him. So it's a good representation. I mean, Ron's going to have thick skin to do this job.
Well, he's the first black officer in the department.
Right.
So
Colorado
you don't want to sugarcoat that one. The town's going to hate you right off the bat, and the police department's going to hate you right off the bat. So he's got an uphill battle.
The chief plays interesting throughout the movie, but I think that he's almost more on board with having Ron than anybody else.
Did you read the book, Ted?
No.
In the book, it is completely different.
Oh, yeah?
The chief is completely against him in the book.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, the book was really a good read.
I was hoping against hope that that would have been one of the things that would have been real. But
I actually wonder why, though, Spike Lee went that direction. Why didn't he go with somebody that was totally against it in that situation?
Well, he does play a very conservative with him a couple of times, especially when they're talking about J. Edgar Hoover and his antagonistic relationship with the Black Panthers. Mm-hmm. And the chief is completely on board, saying that they're a threat to national security.
Later on, they do the wire thing to catch the other cop who, used brutality,
Right.
He kind of flip-flops all the way throughout the movie, going from one end to the other end, it seems like. It's really strange how that happens. Isaiah Whitlock, which is the one that you were talking about, that we talked about him in the 25th Hour, the one that says she's, or shiz, or oh, shit, but it just... She. Which, for me, I'm not a big fan. It kind of just annoys me a little bit.
You have to see The Wire.
I guess that's the case. It just, when outside of that, I like the fact how he grills him. He asked him, point blank, how he would feel if he was going to be called certain names, how he would respond to it. He doesn't sugarcoat it. Whereas the chief, who is white, really doesn't bring any of that up. The only thing he tells him is that he'll have his back, but he can only do so much, which basically says, but it won't look like I have your back.
I like the Jackie Robinson reference at the beginning, kind of mirroring his responses, how Jackie Robinson handled his responses, and Ron Stallworth completely agreed with that. Do you know who Jackie Robinson is? He's like, yes, I know who he is.
Yeah.
I almost feel like there should have been more of him dealing with racist cops and, racist situations within the department. There was just one bad guy, and everybody else was, on his side. I think there might have been another cop that was just kind of when he came in the record room, that I didn't give him a hard time, but didn't treat him like an equal. But outside of that, I just felt like the police department was a very safe place for him.
In the book, it was the opposite. There were several cops that were out to get him.
Yeah, that
That's-
doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. Spike has... What he's doing here is there's a larger message he wants to get to, and he doesn't want to get bogged down with characters that aren't consequential to the story. That cop is consequential. He's a threat to the investigation and everything. He could have been a Klan member. I think it shows just enough to get us to where we know that, okay, there are some people there that like him, and there's some people that don't, and there's a lot of them that are just kind of standoffish. Because even Adam Driver's character and Johnny, the other intelligence guy, they're not fully on board with him either. They think he's kind of an idealist.
But I always think of that because he was a rookie, not because he was black. I took it from those two that it was because, hey, rookie's never been given, authority over an investigation. That's how I took it. That kind of bothers me a little bit. In the book, you have all these different things, but Spike has also added things to this movie that might not be needed, like the love interest. There is no love interest. In fact, from my understanding, he was already engaged when he became a police officer. Why is the need to add other elements in there when you already have such a great story in this book? It feels like there's important things that should have been added to this movie, and maybe it's for a wider audience. Because I will tell you, out of all the movies Spike Lee has ever done, this actually feels like a studio movie. It has the elements of romance. You have the love interest. We don't see, those type of things in some of other Spike Lee's movies. Me and Ted were talking about this a couple of days ago. Do the Right Thing, for instance, is a message that happens to be in a movie, whereas this is a movie that happens to have a message. I'm not saying it's like a sellout or anything like that, but I think this movie is trying to get a broader audience by introducing things that maybe are not needed.
I'm going to give you a little bit of a curveball again that you're going with about the book. So in the book, him and Flip went to the academy together. So he wasn't a rookie in the book. But Flip was in narcotics and he was a beat cop. But they went together through the academy. It was kind of weird because I read the book. I'd seen the movie. I read the book. And then I watched the movie again. I'm like, wow, there are definitely a lot of differences between it, and you could definitely almost have a different movie if you went just by the book. But I kind of see where Spike was going with this. You kind of have to make a few concessions for, like you said, a wider audience or, more of a Hollywood-style movie.
There are some super serious moments in this movie that are really set up to make an impact. He's kind of has to make the rest of it a little bit more palatable so that when the big shocking things happen, that they fall and they hit where they need to hit. And we forgot to mention here at the beginning, too, the speech by Alec Baldwin, which is shocking. There's so much to unpack in his diatribe that it's just a screed. And it reads as almost like a recruiting tool for either the John Birch Society or the Ku Klux Klan. But one of the interesting things that's brought up here, if you pay attention to the use of the language, Alec Baldwin's character uses the word super predator. And this is one of these connections that Spike makes from the past to the present. Because Predator...
Was he someone of importance, or was it a made-up character?
It's hard to say, because he represents a lot of the guys that were part of the John Birch Society.
Yeah.
But he makes this connection with the term super predator, because that came up again even in the 2020 election, the term super predator, because that had been used in the 90s by the Clintons and by our current president, Joe Biden, to describe what was going on in the inner city and call black people super predators. This is the first instance that he's making a connection from the past to the present. And it's one of those connections that shows that while we have come far, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. It's just interesting to me. The whole speech is just absolutely abominable.
And the speech is that from the 60s or because
probably late 50s.
Late 50s,
like I
early
said,
60s.
The John Birch Society. I mean, there's probably still some old, 70-year-old guys that running around that are members of a John Birch Society group, but their heyday was such a small period of time where they actually held some sway. but that's what it really seems like to me. Because he talks about communists, too. That leads me to the John Birch Society rather than the Klan. The Klan generally doesn't talk about communists a whole lot. They're more interested in talking about Jews and black people and immigrants. And they've held off on the Catholics because I guess they thought that we're not going anywhere anymore.
It's interesting, though, that you bring this up because we did forget about mentioning this at the beginning of the podcast. But for me, it almost feels like it's a great scene, but for whatever reason, it's forgettable. Maybe because it's not referenced again later on in the movie. But the movie takes place roughly late 70s, early 80s, somewhere in that area. But 78, 79.
The early 70s.
The movie's 77.
Or mid-70s.
This is made probably 20 years prior, and it's not really referenced again in the movie. I'm not connected to it. When I originally watched it, I'm like, oh, Alec Baldwin, this is good stuff. But once the movie starts and we get, through the movie, I don't remember it. And maybe it shouldn't be that way, but I think the rest of the movie can be made without that speech at the beginning.
Yeah, there are some subtle things running through as a narrative here, too, throughout the movie that Spike runs. In that same sequence, we have the great scene from Gone with the Wind, the soldiers in Atlanta. We have the picture, Dixie playing slowly as they show the aftermath of the Battle of Atlanta. It's considered an epic, and we will have a connection to that later when we find out that they use Birth of a Nation in their initiation ceremonies. We can discuss that, too.
Powerful scene. That's very powerful.
He's connecting there, like, this is a Hollywood thing, too, from back in that period of time, of how things were projected on screen. Because what essentially Alec Baldwin is talking about, a narrative coming out of the Civil War called the Lost Cause narrative. And that's the basis of which the Klan was founded, was on the Lost Cause narrative. And that directly is what Gone with the Wind is. Train of thought coming out of the Civil War.
And that's why we need to get rid of Gone with the Wind. It needs to be removed from...
Well,
the only reason why I say that is because I know your wife is a big
yes.
Gone with the Wind fan. And me, I don't hate the movie, but I think it's the most overrated movie in the history of movies, or most overrated movie that won an Academy Award, in my opinion.
I find people who say that they got into the Civil War because of Gone with the Wind, I look at them with a skeptic's eye. It doesn't deal in reality. We'll put it that way. Yeah, it's a real interesting how we get set out here. And, it's...
I mean, I love Spike Lee in the fact that he loves to use history to tell a story. I love the fact that he uses something like Gone with the Wind, that he uses, like, Alec Baldwin in that speech, kind of set everything up. I like those things. I don't know if, for me, as just a casual movie guy who doesn't look for those connections as much as maybe, let's say, you do, because I don't connect Birth of the Nation with Gone with the Wind. But I know Birth of the Nation was a huge movie that resurrected the Ku Klux Klan. When you watch that scene, you watch the Klan watching that movie, and then on the other side, you got Belafonte describing what had happened to a man who... That scene is just so powerful, going back and forth. That really stands out to me. I mean, that when I think of this movie, I think of those scenes going back and forth. But this beginning here, for whatever reason, I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm not saying take it out. But for whatever reason, once the movie starts going, I totally forget about what I saw in the first couple of minutes of the film.
It's not supposed to be one of the indelible images of it. It's one of those things that subconsciously, when you see it on multiple viewings, you can catch some of the language, and then you can make the connection to modern day. It's one of those things that I like to point out because it's something that I caught. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know if people back in the late 1950s were using the term super predator. And that's where it kind of stuck out to me because it seemed out of place in a 1950s type of a propaganda film. But, going forward with our story with Ron, he has these interactions, but then the first thing that they want him to do is to go and essentially infiltrate a meeting with Stokely Carmichael, a.k.a. Kwame Ture. Eric, you said this is 1977.
Yeah, Black Panthers were done.
the
he
Day
fled
of the
country
Panther.
and came back.
Well, the reason that a lot of them disbanded was after the assassination of Fred Hampton in Chicago. That was blatant, outright murder. At that point, they knew that guys like Stokely Carmichael, that their days were numbered in America, that essentially the government was going to come for them and kill them.
Stokely Carmichael is a very interesting character in himself. I thought that the speech that was portrayed in the movie was very tamed as compared to how Stokely Carmichael gave speeches and his demeanor. Up until his death, dying of cancer, he believed that the government gave him cancer to kill him. He was literally paranoid and just,
And he had every right to be.
Oh, of course he did.
Those guys had every right to be. Some of them were incarcerated without cause. Like I said, what happened to Fred Hampton is one of the greatest tragedies in American history.
And I think in the movie, the reason why the speech was made more tame, if Stokely Carmichael gave one of his traditional speeches, which would have been, Black Power, kill Whitey, I think at that point the police probably would have came in and raided the place, and the movie's over. He was able to give kind of like a positive spin on the speech when the chief was asking him the questions based on what he heard on the recording and everything.
After the speech was over, you had Ron come up to meet him. Stokely basically tell him that a war is intimate. It's going to happen. Be prepared.
Right.
He kind of whispered it in his ear. He didn't want everybody to hear what he had to say.
Which traditionally that would be his starting line in his speeches, but I thought that was a nice twist too. Actually, I like that.
He was one of the more out front, loud speakers from the Panthers, and we could sit for 2 hours and discuss the politics of the Panthers, because in some areas of the country they did a lot of good for people in the inner city.
But I mean, ultimately, when it comes to this movie, the only reason why he was kind of bumped up to narcotics was because he was black.
Because he's
and he kind of had to make a name for himself, which makes perfect sense. No one else in the police department is going to be able to infiltrate that meeting.
It serves as a transition to move the story along. He meets his girlfriend, and
based on lies, but he still meets her. All right. Yeah.
No, I do like the scene. And I do like the fact that as he's giving the speech, you have these cuts where you can see the hope in the people's eyes as he's talking. This is the unfortunate part about that sort of hope that those people have in their eyes as he's speaking like that. That's what people said about Fred Hampton. When he would speak, the people would get that hopeful look and everything like that. And
ultimately in this movie, Ron sees that hope, but first and foremost, he's a cop, and that's what his love is. It's a loyalty thing. His love is being an officer. His love is being law and order. He really believes that there are good cops out there. He knows there are bad cops out there. Obviously, he's seen it. He's witnessed it. His girlfriend has clearly witnessed it. When push comes to shove, his number one loyalty is for the Colorado Springs Police Department.
Right, whereas Patrice is the exact opposite. She's kind of like, you have a few bad cops, which means that the whole system's corrupt, which means everybody's probably corrupt. And
they're not cops, they're pigs. She refers to them as pigs.
And he can't stand that. He doesn't like that term because, he's a cop.
It's funny because later in the movie, when Adam Driver's in the truck with Ivanhoe, the Klan refers to them as pigs too.
They kind of have the same view of them because the Klan wants to do what they want to do, and they keep on getting stopped by the police.
Because they're a terrorist organization.
Exactly. It's interesting about Patrice because we just talked about the speech that Kwame gave, but her reaction, the way she talks, is kind of like almost what you were saying, Eric, about how he would have that would have been probably his message, right? And she kind of refers his message about a war with the police. Like you said, his message is toned down, but his message kind of comes out in her throughout the movie.
She clearly would have been a part of the Black Panther movement if born a little earlier.
She's definitely more militant than most people, of course. With his speech, even though it is very tamed down, it's still relevant today as it was then, if indeed he would have given that speech then. I mean, because essentially we're dealing with this very similar thing now, where there's an epidemic of people being shot in the back by cops. It's sick to say, but it's the truth.
So, Ted, you were talking about how Ron was promoted to narcotics because he was black. But at first, they wouldn't promote him, and they kept him in the records room. And then they had this one, this job for him to do. We don't really get to see why he promoted him to narcotics, do we? I mean, outside...
Well, he's promoted to intelligence.
Intelligence,
and
sorry.
so he's told them he wants to go undercover. And generally, if you're going undercover in 1970s, it's going to be into narcotics.
Yeah.
But
right.
They really don't have a position for him in intelligence. And that's when he's reading the paper and sees the... It's shocking to me, but it's not, that an ad for the Klan would be in the classified section.
So in the book,
of a newspaper.
The one difference in the book, which I thought was interesting, and I'm sorry I keep harping on the book. In the book, he actually sees the ad, writes a letter.
Right.
And then
still using his own name.
Yeah, he's still using his own name. And then 2 weeks later, he gets a call from that character. Yeah, from that character. And in this one, he just calls a number in the paper.
Question for you.
Yes.
In the book, was he a rookie at the time that he mailed out that request? From what I've read, it seems like there's a time has passed since he first joined the police force.
When he first started off, it was the early 70s, so he was kind of 5 years into it, and he kind of worked his way up into that kind of intelligence role by doing the stakeout at the Black Rights Movement and then a few other little things. But it doesn't go into a lot of detail, but he is ultimately promoted into that role, and his main role is kind of to infiltrate leftist groups, if you will. Not necessarily the Klan. And that's the interesting thing. His main target in the book was not the Klan up front, but he thought that the ad in the paper was so weird, he's like, I'm just going to respond to it and see what happens. And he did a few other things in the book as well, responding to other groups, but the Klan actually responded a couple weeks later with a phone call to the private line.
Yeah, I like the phone call instead of sending the letter here. This is one thing that I like that Spike Lee did for the movie that's different from the book, because the conversation that he has initially, he has that conversation with, I believe, Walter Breachway. Walter Breachway is an interesting character because he's a David Duke disciple, right? He's kind of like the nonviolent one, it sounds like, compared to some of the other people in the group. But that initial phone call going back and forth, just to hear him talk and then see Adam Driver slowly move his chair around to listening to everything that Ron Starwalter was saying is priceless. It's one of my favorite parts of the whole movie is just watching Adam Driver's reaction to this. When he was on the phone, I didn't know this about John David Washington. I didn't know he was Denzel Washington's son at the time. And I'm sitting here going, man, he sounds like a really young Denzel Washington. And then after the credits came up at the end of the movie, I'm like, Washington, huh? He has his dad's mannerisms, talks like his dad.
He does, yes.
He's a great actor in his own right. I'm not trying to say, carbon copy of his dad. He's really good here.
It's kind of like a Kirk Douglas and a Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
Two great actors, very similar, but each have their own characteristics.
Look alike, kind of talk a little bit alike, yes. I just enjoy this, and I love at the end of the phone call where Adam Driver is just like, you used your own name?
Yeah, right.
Just the reaction to that is
he's like, I guess I did.
But I like that liberty that Spike Lee took there. I'm not a big fan of liberties being taken all the time, but here it makes sense, especially later on. He actually does have conversations over the phone with David Duke, so it's not a huge stretch. I think it's kind of interesting that you just said that he wasn't a rookie, but they refer him to as a rookie during this investigation.
In the movie, he's a rookie, and Flip is a narcotics guy who's been on the force a couple years. In the book, they went to the academy together and kind of went different routes after they graduated. So they'd known each other for years, and they weren't technically a rookie. It wasn't a rookie running the investigation. That was a liberty, which I think kind of made a little... I kind of like that route.
And that's what we have to do with some of these movies that are based on a true story. What we have to know is what's the message being related. That's the most important part. The first black officer in the Colorado Springs infiltrates the Ku Klux Klan. That's the thing here. The love story, the relationships that he has with the other officers, him being a rookie or him not being wrong, that's movie stuff to drive a movie. Because sometimes I get frustrated when I watch a movie that's based on a true story and then I find out 90% of it never happened, right? We're right now going through an issue with The Blind Side, right? About the football player who's, suing the family that they didn't adopt him. I guess he was...
Conservatorship.
Over him. But this is different. I don't feel like I'm being cheated in this movie because I think Spike Lee makes the right choices to drive this movie forward and for me to be entertained, but yet get the message across. There's still a lot of bad people out there that do a lot of bad things to good people, and it needs to stop.
I'll tell you, Spike Lee did a hell of a job casting in this movie. I like Spike Lee as a director. I'm going to be honest, I don't like Spike Lee as an actor. If I never saw him act again, I would not lose any sleep over it.
He probably would agree with you on that. He probably would agree with you on that.
So I'm very thankful that he didn't insert himself into this movie to actually possibly play the role of Ron. I think casting-wise, he did a really good job when you look at some of these names. And not everyone here is a big hitter. I mean, Ashley Atkinson, I don't even know who the hell she was. But she was incredible in this movie. And Topher Grace, oh my goodness. I mean, he is without a doubt my favorite character in the movie. I mean, he just epitomized like that.
He looked like David Duke from the 70s.
Oh, it was, and his mannerisms and just the way he played that character was just, oh man, it was priceless. He should have got supporting. He should have got nominated for supporting on that one.
He plays a slime bag really good.
Really good.
And some of those conversations that they have, but I'm not shocked that this is how they talk. I unfortunately have been confronted with people who talk like this.
These aren't stereotypes. These are the way actual people in the Klan and certain parts of the country do talk, and the ignorance and the hate. It's alive today as it was in 1878, 1978, 2023.
Yeah, the one story where Duke is talking about his mammy.
Yeah.
And it's just horrible.
Yeah.
What Topher Grace also does is he also proves that you can dress up and put lipstick on a pig.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it's still a pig.
And David Duke in real life is a heavily educated man. He is not what you would suspect to be the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan or anyone in higher power of the Klan. He is a very educated man and really tried to put a non-violent, I don't want to say non-racist, non-violent spin.
He wanted to make the Klan corporate.
We don't hang people anymore. We're just here for white purity. That's all we want.
And all of that is whitewash.
Right.
Because we see how he truly feels. His version of the Klan is so much more insidious than the covert rube that we get from, like, Felix, who's just a redneck, just a complete piece of trash.
Redneck, racist.
Because Duke is educated, and what he wanted to do was get educated people
give legitimacy
into the Klan.
To the organization.
And
legitimacy. And we all know David Duke has run for president, I believe, 3 times.
Oh, yeah.
He's run for state
definitely.
Legislature, U.S. Senate. Came close.
It's very scary, and recently, this particular person's life has been thrown into controversy quite a bit, but a person who really went a long way to exposing the real side of the Klan was Jerry Springer.
Oh.
Because he would bring him on his show. Those were the best episodes of the Jerry Springer Show, where these guys would come out and parade themselves out, and they exposed themselves for exactly who they were. As much as you might hate him now, too, Geraldo did the same thing, and so did Phil Donahue.
Yeah. Didn't they throw a chair at Geraldo? Break his nose?
Yes, broke his nose.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. You have to say this about Topher. I love the conversation between him and Ron Stallworth when they're talking about in the family.
Mammy.
He kind of tries to humanize him a little bit, which we know he's trash, right? David Duke is just complete trash. But he allows us to kind of see a more well-rounded character by that. Like you said earlier, we have the redneck who just has a lot of hate. But with Topher, what he does here with David Duke, he kind of makes him, I don't want to say relatable because garbage shouldn't be relatable, but he just does a nice little spin. I know he had an interview was with them, and he said it was the hardest character that he ever had to play because you always try to find some good or something relatable to that character to have like a common interest, right? Something you could relate to in order to play the part. And he said he couldn't find anything.
Oh, I thought you were going to say
Anything at all.
Topher Grace as a white supremacist. That would be... What a realization.
What a realization.
It all makes sense now.
I love that conversation. I really
Yeah.
do, because it's a conversation that it's not stereotyping either character. They're actually having like a real conversation there. I think it's one of my favorite parts in the whole movie, because as Ted was like saying a little bit earlier, it's like it's those characters that make you feel, they try to pretend that they're good human beings, but underneath they're scum. Those are the ones that you have to be really scared of. And I think that's what this movie does right here. It shows that David Duke, he can go into a room and captivate an audience. And even a conversation over the phone, he can make you really be part of that conversation. You guys are right. He deserves at least Best Supporting Actor nomination. And I would never thought I would say that about him in anything. Because to be honest with you, not one of my favorite actors. I mean, the 70s Show is fine, but everything else that I've seen him in, I just think of him in the 70s Show. Here, he showed me he was a real actor for once.
No, the conversation, like you said, it does try to humanize him. Whether or not Spike essentially wrote this particular section, we don't know. But immediately, the moment you start to feel some sort of humanity, Ron Stallworth brings it right back to reality. And it's like, well, that's what a good blank will do. Like a dog, make you feel like they're a part of the family. And it's really shocking. We only really get to see 4 real Klan characters. One being Felix and the other being Ivanhoe. Which basically those two, in my opinion, they're stereotypes.
Oh my
Even
goodness.
though Felix is extremely scary. Because he's the scary type of Klansman.
Yeah.
And then Ivanhoe's just the dumb redneck.
If you put Felix the head of the chapter, you got some serious shit going down.
Yeah.
He doesn't put up with anything.
He's your Timothy McVeigh type.
Yes.
That's going to blow something up.
Himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, mercifully. and there's some uncomfortable things, too. Because there's a section with Adam Driver. Can you imagine having to read that conversation about how 2 people look at the Holocaust?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just the whole movie itself is a movie that if you have any type of, I don't want to say you have
human being?
No. I mean, a movie like this, you have to go into this. You got to remember, this is a movie. These are actors. They are playing parts. These are not how they feel. And the dialogue they are reading is dialogue that was written for them. And you have to go into this and watch this as a movie. But there are some people that cannot stand certain language being used. They cannot stand certain topics being discussed. And this movie has a lot of uncomfortable scenes in it. I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of uncomfortable scenes. But for a movie this caliber, if it was kind of made like in a PG or a PG-13 version, where you were kind of dancing around that, this would not be even remotely watchable movie.
Because
you have to have these scenes. You have to have this dialogue, and you have to have these characters.
It's like the scene where they're shooting their guns, and we don't see what they're shooting at.
Until the end, right, when Ron
Until
walks
the end,
over there.
When Ron walks over, and then you realize, and you're like, holy crap.
Running Africans,
That scene right there, I think, was the first one that really just hit me hard. You had all these other uncomfortable things that were happening, but that, like you said, that was like language and opinions and things of that nature where you're like, okay, you're just an idiot, or wow, I can't believe Adam Driver said all these things, right? To get to that gun scene, and Adam Driver has to hit a bullseye, and you don't know what he's hitting a bullseye of, and then you realize, boom. And then from there on, the rest of the movie is hitting you hard.
Yeah.
Whether it be
That's a very powerful scene. I'm glad you brought that up. That was a turning point for me when I was... That was a turning point for me when I was watching this movie, when the music, the perfect music build up there, where Ron is hiding in the bushes watching these guys. He's seeing what they're shooting. We don't. And you get that image of him walking out of the bushes after they leave. He picks up some of the shells and he walks over, and the music raises, and then you have the camera pan over to the images in like a wide shot, and you could just see a series of the steel African natives running like they're running through the jungle for their lives, being picked off by these guys. It was such a powerful scene. I got to give Spike Lee credit for that one.
Out of all of Spike Lee's movies that I've seen, this one is visually stunning to me. The cinematography, the camera angles, the shots of Colorado itself. This is, I want to say, a beautifully made movie, but the images, the way the camera comes in on things, I think this is his best movie when it comes to that. From the beginning of the movie where they were showing the Colorado area, the trees and this, it's very vivid. And then when you see something like this and how they come in and they show Ron looking at all this and slowly bring you to see what he's seeing, I think some of Spike Lee's best work.
It's powerful. They're shooting at something. They're shooting at targets because you hear the pings.
Right.
And anybody who knows anything knows that they're hitting something.
Most of the time, you're just hitting circles. You're
exactly.
Hitting,
and
they're
what
flip
you
targets.
Think. And so that's what you're thinking. The language and the conversations are totally needed because I think there's a lot of people that don't believe that conversations like the conversation about the Holocaust that Flip and Felix have. To most people, I think, no, nobody really talks that way. But unless you've encountered people that do, which I have, unfortunately.
Me too, when I was younger.
There's a lot of these conversations where they come off silly, but they're not. This is exactly what these people believe. And
I had a conversation within the last couple of years. Not going to name any names. Ken, no. I had a conversation a couple of years ago with a gentleman who was avid that Sandy Hook did not happen. And he spoke to me for about a half hour, literally giving me all of his information on why this did not happen. It was actors. It was a government conspiracy. I mean, and he was dead serious. He really, really thought about this was true. And this is an upstanding member, of a community who has day-to-day interactions with people all over the place. But he was adamant about this. I didn't question him because I wanted to see where he was going with this. So I played dumb. I'm like, really?
You played
actors?
dumb?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm like, actors, really? I'm kind of egging him on a little bit on it. He is just literally, because he thinks that I really am listening to what he's saying. But what I'm actually doing is I'm trying to interpret and trying to gather this information and kind of see what kind of individual I'm dealing with. And someone of that caliber is pretty much the same type of individual who would be in the Ku Klux Klan. Someone in this movie who is brainwashed into these beliefs.
It's interesting that you bring this up because you have those two guys that are shooting along with them that are supposedly, I guess, from NORAD, right?
Yeah,
and you're thinking about people who are here. So you have people who are in these important places. They're part of our defense, right? From what they were saying in the movie itself, at least, that they had high clearance.
He met with the FBI guy under the bridge there.
The book focuses a lot more about military government officials that are Ku Klux Klan members.
Yeah.
I think it focuses more on that. And I would have liked to seen a little bit more of that in this movie because I think that, that we want to hear, right? I actually would prefer to hear more about that than actually the car bombing thing at the end because we know that never really happened. It's great for movie effect and you know you want bad guys to die, right? And you want them to die a gruesome death and you want the wife to be blamed for it because she's a piece of work too, and you want him to save the girlfriend, right? That's typical movie stuff. But for people who really want to hear the true story, I would love to hear more about that. That would have been really great to hear.
Time Magazine and Newsweek, they've been running articles for decades about getting white supremacists out of the military and things of that nature. These people have made it into the highest parts of society. And this is exactly what David Duke wanted, is to that integration into higher society.
It's like with Ron Starworth when he's talking to his sergeant, and the sergeant's telling him about that one day, white supremacists might even be a president of the United States. Ron Starworth was like, that's never going to happen. And he called him ignorant. How can you be that ignorant about that?
Mm-hmm.
Of course it can happen. And I thought that was a very interesting scene.
Some would argue it already has.
Oh.
No. Not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
Oh, okay.
Our history as far as presidential politics and race relations.
Well, we all know that
has been
LBJ
horrible.
was racist. We know Nixon was racist. I mean, the tapes clearly show it and listen to it. So
Woodrow Wilson wasn't the last racist president.
Oh, yeah. No,
in American history. Okay. I do want to go in and discuss the part of the movie that I think is the most important part of the movie. To say that it's disturbing doesn't really do anything justice. And that's why I can forgive a lot of the fun stuff like the blaxploitation, because there's a couple of things they do that it's like Shaft and Coffee and all of the fun
Superfly.
Superfly and all the blaxploitation stuff. That's a lot of fun. It stops being fun when we get to the part where they're actually indoctrinating, they're actually becoming members. The members being sworn into the Klan, juxtaposed with Harry Belafonte telling a story, which is a true story. There's no other way to put it. It was a brutal murder. It was a lynching. It's horrible.
Oh, it was more than a lynching, Ted. They set him on fire alive.
Yeah, no,
it was brutal.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And the contrast between both those scenes is...
It's shocking, as well as it should be. But the story deserves to be told. And what's interesting, because towards the end of the story, Harry Belafonte says that they took pictures.
Yeah.
And put them on postcards.
Yeah.
People collected those postcards.
Sure.
That's how many of those postcards were made throughout the South and parts of the North.
Didn't they show those postcards in the movie?
No.
No, they
did not.
But
they did not.
They had pictures of things that looked like some type of lynching.
They did have pictures, but they weren't of the postcards.
Okay.
I know for a fact. I've seen enough documentaries and things. I think
the choice of Harry Belafonte giving that speech was just incredible. Once again, incredible casting.
Yeah.
And we lost him this year. He just recently passed away.
Well, we all know he was a very strong civil rights activist.
Yes.
So it worked out beautifully. And I liked when he was giving the speech that all the people in the meeting were just like glued to his story.
Yes.
You could hear a pin drop.
Right.
No one was talking about Black Power or Kill Whitey or any. They just wanted to hear this story. No
kind of like
emotion.
the opposite of the earlier one. Same intensity as far as listening to the speaker.
Oh yeah,
but a different message.
Right.
And the fact that they bring up the story and the jury deliberated for 4 minutes.
Right. Exactly.
Before convicting him. I mean,
it probably took him 4 minutes to walk back, sit down, and get up and walk out.
Exactly. It's just shockingly horrible.
Yeah.
And then to have it counterpointed with them watching Birth of a Nation.
Oh, I know, right?
Which is not available for sale in America anymore, thankfully. If you want it, you have to get it on the black market. This was considered at the time the first blockbuster movie.
Didn't Woodrow Wilson watch it at the White House?
Yes. And Harry Belafonte brings that up. Woodrow Wilson was quoted as to saying it was history put on film by lightning. It's based off of an equally horrible book, BlacKkklansman. There's a kind of an innocence with the Lost Cause narrative that you get with Gone with the Wind that is completely the opposite with Birth of a Nation. This Birth of a Nation, it is about that the Klan was right. And it did. It sparked a huge increase in the resurgence of the Klan after World War I. The scene is scary when the Klansman comes and saves the white woman from the black devils in the movie. We have them standing up, giving the Nazi salute, saying white power. And I believe it's in this scene that we also hear David Duke giving his speech, and he talks about America first and how they want to make America great again. These are terms that have been used by racists for a long time. Whether it was Irish immigrants, Italian immigrants, African Americans, or people of Jewish ancestry, or Catholics, these people had it out for these four people.
Well, this movie definitely opens up those wounds and really gets you thinking.
It hits you across the face.
Yeah.
The power of these scenes, it's what makes this movie, in my opinion. This is the heart of the movie. Give Spike a little bit of credit here, too. After that's over, we do have the funny scene where Ron takes a picture with David Duke. That is funny. Kind of tries to cut the tension.
So, question for you here, Eric, since you're the book guy here.
Yeah, fire away.
So they're at that clan initiation. Now they're having their dinner and things of that nature. And Ron decides he needs a picture with David Duke. Did that actually happen, the picture itself?
Yeah, that scene is pretty fair, pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate.
Except Duke lost it a little bit more in the book.
He wasn't as polite afterwards.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I'm sure.
And he wasn't polite from the moment he met him. Like, for example, when Ron walks up to David Duke and goes, hey, I'm your security for your event. And he's like, Mr. Duke, I don't agree with your politics, your ethics, or who you are, but I respect my my job and my position. I'll uphold law. And then David Duke looks at him and goes, well, I respect you for that. I respect your position. Which
in the book it's different?
He never said like two words to him.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder why. I don't know. I feel like, don't we want to see more David Duke the asshole?
Actually, no. I actually like the David Duke in the movie more than I like David Duke in the book.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. You like David Duke more in the movie than the book.
Well, he's made out to be more buffoonish than he is in real life. Like with any major figure who's controversial like that, you do satire on them to try to take some of the air out of their baloney.
I wonder why you let him have a picture with him to begin with. He could have easily said no. I mean, it's kind of interesting that he would allow that to even happen.
In the book, he did not allow it.
So in the book, he just snuck behind and kind of had the picture snapped, huh?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
Other people were taking pictures. He kind of photobombed it.
I think that would have been cooler, actually. I actually think they should have kept that in. They're taking pictures, and all of a sudden you see like him just kind of like walk by and smile.
Yeah.
Something like that. I think that would have been funny. That would have actually related more to 2018, with photobombs and things of that nature. I think it would have played off a little bit better because, first of all, it's more real. It really happened. Here, it makes you wonder why David Duke would even agree to it. Again, interesting choices by Spike Lee. Not saying they're bad choices, because I really enjoyed this movie, but it's kind of interesting what he decided to put in, what he decided to leave out, and what he decided to change.
Something had to cut the tension. Like I said, we just came from the most emotional part of the movie. And so to cut that tension, it is because it is legitimately funny. And if you don't laugh out loud, I'm sorry, then I can't help you. But it makes me laugh out loud every time. Because I think it's hilarious that he grabs him. But
he just puts his hand on his shoulder. That's all he does.
Yeah.
On both guys,
yeah.
just puts his hand on his shoulders.
And it makes me laugh.
Yeah.
But I also know had Ron done that in real life,
they would have beat the hell out of him. But they all are going, in the movie, they are going towards him. Ron, like, you lay a hand on me,
right.
I will arrest you guys.
I think it's interesting how you put it, Ted, that, it cuts the tension with a little comedy here. I like this movie so much by Spike Lee. I think this is where he's at his best with building tension and then bringing something to diffuse the tension. Something funny, or maybe the romance, or whatever the case may be, to bring us back down. And then we build ourselves back up, bring ourselves back down. For me, out of all the Spike Lee movies that I've seen, and I've watched a good number of films, as a movie maker, this might be, like, from start to finish, like a real movie. Like, I Do the Right Thing, totally different type of movie. It's a message that's in a movie, where this is a movie that has a message. That's what I said earlier. This is more a movie that I feel like you could watch just in general. You can, pop in anytime you want, come in and out of it, turn on the TV, it was on, you're good to go. Whereas, like, Do the Right Thing, if you do that, you're going to miss the whole message. You have to watch Do the Right Thing from start to finish to get the message here. This has a message, but this is for entertainment. That's how I look at it. So I think this is Spike Lee at his best with entertaining us with a message. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
The last time that he diffuses some of the tension is the very end, where after we've had there's that, but he does it because we have the drama of the whole ending where the blow up goes wrong and the Klan members die. He builds that tension really well, and then diffuses it because then we get to see how they bust Landers for being a complete piece of trash. But then we get the phone call, which I know that Eric's going to say the phone call never happened. It didn't, by all accounts, is what I've heard, but it's hilarious. Mm-hmm. And this is a joke that plays out because David Duke's not the only person who mentions that they can tell a black person from a white person based on how they talk.
The chief as well.
And the chief does that as well.
Yeah.
The look on Topher Grace's face is priceless, and how it ends like that.
Yeah, and he's like, okay.
It is legitimately funny. But then we're at the very end of the movie. We get the message, too, that we've come a long way, but there's still work to be done. I have a hard time watching the pictures of the car running into the group of people.
Oh, Charlottesville?
Because at Charlottesville, because we know that somebody died there. There's people who are permanently injured from what that monster did. All over a statue. It's funny because everybody decries the news, but it was actually news people who had to act as historians for the majority of Americans who didn't know what blood and soil meant. Blood and soil was a Nazi propaganda tool, as well as Jews will not replace us. Jewish replacement theory has been something that's been taught by Nazis and people who hate Jews for generations. And we had that in America. We had that in Charlottesville. This is the home of the University of Virginia that was founded by Thomas Jefferson, the writer of the Declaration of Independence. And these people, and I hate to even use that term, because they're not people in my opinion. They're evil, marching, using these Nazi propaganda stuff that Lili Riefenstahl would have used in propaganda movies for the Third Reich.
Man, you're bringing us down, Ted.
I know.
It's really bummed me out here.
It's horrible. I mean,
well, it is horrible.
It's horrible.
I think it's good that Spike Lee brought those scenes towards the end of the movie because it really drives home that, hey, you got the Klan still here and active and in the forefront, and you had David Duke at that meeting in Charlottesville,
exactly.
And you had the President of the United States saying some stuff he probably should not have said, and it's all saying that, hey, this is top tier now. This is at the top of the food chain. They're not, backwoods rednecks that are just wandering around burning crosses and throwing rocks through windows. They're mainstream, and they're here, and it hasn't gone away, and things have not changed for the better in America. And I think that was a really good statement that Spike Lee put in this movie at the end to really drive it home, because you had real-life events there, and it was tough to watch.
It acts as a perfect bookend to the movie.
Yeah, it is. It's a perfect bookend. Absolutely.
I think it's the most powerful bookend to the movie. I mean, I think it's more powerful even with the Do the Right Thing, where he shows Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. I think because you're showing pictures and videotape, it hits hard.
Yeah.
It really does.
He's letting people use their own words to hang themselves.
Yeah. I mean, you got those people that are doing it, but then you also have the victims, who were there crying out about what had happened. There's just something about the realism at that really just makes you think and makes you realize, like you said, both of you, in a lot of ways, we've come a long way. But in a lot of ways, we're almost back where we started. Because you have these groups kind of like hide, like, hey, let's just be honest, like cowards, and pop up whenever opportunity presents itself.
Sure.
And that's unfortunate. And I appreciate this movie for continue opening up our eyes to see. I was having this discussion with my wife earlier today. It's important for us to be educated. It's easy to live in our own bubbles and pretend that, certain things are not happening in the world, right? Suburb white boy here who, didn't experience much of this in the area that I grew up with. But then, like with Ted being, where he lived as a kid, you saw more of that racist type of behavior. As I've grown up and got older and hung out with more different people, then I started hearing more of that racist stuff, type of things. I was kind of like in my own little bubble in my teens and in my 20s, and I didn't experience any of this until I hit my 30s, and then it's just like, wow. I didn't think films like this are designed for people like me. Like, what does Spike Lee say in every movie? Wake up. And I think this is a wake-up movie. Just like Do the Right Thing was a wake-up movie. This is a wake-up movie, and I appreciate Spike Lee for waking me up.
Well, we have really did a deep dive in this movie. We've talked about a little bit of everything, even current politics. Couldn't ask for more. But it is time now to discuss our reviews of BlacKkklansman. And Ken, why don't you kick us off?
I love this movie for a lot of different reasons, and that I've already explained. Spike Lee is another wake-up call for myself and for others, but he puts it in a kind of a more of a movie presentation. This movie, like I said, has the message, but it is also very entertaining. The actors here are very, very good. Washington is extremely... The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. He's going to be a great actor in his own right. Adam Driver, kind of interesting to me that Adam Driver seems to play Adam Driver through every movie that he does, but for some reason, it's with a lot of range. And I'm still trying to figure out how Adam Driver does it. You plug him in, he talks exactly like I hear him in almost every single movie, but somehow it's brilliant. We talked about Topher Grace as David Duke. He looked like the spitting image of him in the 70s. I was like, wow. And the way he presented David Duke was in a way that it was kind of inviting you in to kind of try to know David Duke. It wasn't trying to push you away and say, this character is so evil, you don't want to even invest in it. But Spike Lee makes you invest into David Duke. I'm not political in any type of way, but I will come out and say for David Duke, this guy's a scumbag. So anyway, I think the movie's beautifully shot. I still don't think the love interest was needed. I don't think it goes anywhere. The only reason why we have it is at the end to try to save her so she doesn't die at the end. But I didn't really feel any chemistry between the two leads. They didn't really mix at all. At no time did I feel like that she was interested in him in any type of way. That's the only downside to this movie. And I think maybe it was designed that way. Maybe, you wanted Washington to be really into her, but she was not into him, and maybe that's how you wanted to leave it. But then you have it at the end in the apartment together, like they're a couple. And for me, it's like I didn't really see how it got there. I'm going to finish up my grade here. So my grade is a B+. This is a movie that I'm going to watch again and again because not only does it have a great message, it's very entertaining.
Okay. Well, I don't want to say I made the mistake, but it kind of is. I made the mistake of reading the book last week, and I think it kind of threw off a little bit of my viewing pleasure in watching the movie. I should have read the book, say, like after we did this podcast, but I didn't. So a lot of me watching this movie, I was doing a lot of comparisons to the book, and I got to say, the book is really good. It's like 188 pages. It's a pretty easy read, and it was well written. If you get the CD version, it's read by the author, Ron Stallworth. So it's kind of neat there as well. But overall, I thought this movie was really good. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the choice of actors that were picked in this. I thought he did an incredible job with selection. Everything on it was great. Ken, you mentioned the cinematography on this, which I thought was really good. Always one of my strong points in a movie. I thought the comparison, the comparing Clash's scenes together, with the initiation and the reading of the event that happened by Harry Belafonte. I thought that was a very powerful scene. And the way this movie was edited together was just really incredible. I'm going to admit, Spike Lee is not one of my favorite directors by a long shot, and I don't think the guy can act, to get out of a paper bag. But this movie really put him on the forefront, and kind of look forward to another Spike Lee movie down the road now. This movie was great. I really thought the subject matter was a perfect choice, and I know some liberties had to be made, obviously, between the book and the movie, but I think overall it was done very well, and yeah, it got snubbed at the awards, obviously. But for me, this movie, man, I'm teetering. I'm really teetering between like a B plus. B plus is strong. If I didn't read the book, I'd probably go B plus, but I'm going B. Solid movie. We'll watch it again, clearly. Additional plug. Read the book. I think you're going to like it. Ted, take us home.
I agree with pretty much everything you guys have said here. I'm pretty well read. I try to pride myself on being well read and knowing, funny bits of, useless trivia. Until this movie was made, I never knew that this experience actually took place. And I'm happy that the story has gotten told, even if there were liberties taken with the story. The fact of the matter is a black guy became a member of the Ku Klux Klan. It's absolutely hilarious. Anytime you can make them look like idiots, the idiots that they are, I'm all for that. This movie is powerful. I think this movie is just as powerful, maybe if not more so, than Do the Right Thing. Because there's a direct connection between the past and the present. Those things can't be fabricated, and it shows truth. Like I said, a lot of these conversations are so uncomfortable. But unless you've actually heard people talk like that, it's easy to dismiss it. I know that's how some of these people talk. If you don't want to watch the whole movie, watch the scene, the Harry Belafonte scene. Hear that story. Know that that story's true. And that the people taking those pictures and putting them on postcards were doing that for people to collect. And then you kind of get the idea of what the magnitude of what we're dealing with. The dehumanization of another person. It really grasps that. That's why I give a lot of credit to the rest of the movie that's built around these sections that are so serious. There has to be some levity, because if it's not, it's too dreary. And like you said, Eric, this is perfectly cast. There's not one person here that I would really even change. It's played perfect. And yeah, it probably was snubbed at the Oscars that year, although Spike did win his first Oscar, which was long overdue. He's a unique director, and he's a unique voice, a voice that we need. As far as BlacKkklansman goes, this is a movie I've liked since the first moment I saw it. This is a solid A for me. Like Ken said, it may be his best movie. A lot of people would say Malcolm X. We can have that discussion on another day. I agree with Ken. This is probably, as far as a complete movie from cinematography all the way through to story, it's probably his best. That's why I give it an A. I can't recommend it enough. It's tough, but the fun parts make it a little bit more easy to take. A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, kind of a thing. And, I agree with Ken, too. It's time for us to wake up.
So the message of this podcast is agree with Ken, is what I'm getting.
Agree with Ken. You'll never hear it again.
Right. Exactly.
Notify the media. Mark the time. Agree with Ken.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we all liked it. How about that? It's good to be back. It really is.
They're good to have you back.
Yeah. Well, Ted, where can they find us out there on Twitterland or X or whatever the hell they want to call it now?
Yeah, they're calling
Lots
it X
changed
or
since
Twitter.
I've come back.
Yeah, I don't know. Elon has taken it over and renamed it X. I don't know, Malcolm X? I don't know.
Maybe.
So we can be found on that platform at hookedon_movies and whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Good Pods. Leave us a 5-star review if you can. Write a review, because the more reviews we get, the more likely it is we can get to our goal of hopefully one day being Rotten Tomatoes certified.
All right. Ken, Facebook?
as far as Facebook, feel free to join us. Just look us up on Hooked on Movies. Request to join the group, and we'll prove you and get you in before they start calling it Meta. I know it's supposed to be Meta, but I still see it as Facebook, so I get confused.
Yeah.
I get confused on what it is as well. All these name changes or not name changes or whatever. But right now, let's still call it Facebook and
There we go.
Join the discussion.
Well, thank you, everybody. And I also want to thank Justin for filling in on 25th Hour. And hopefully we'll have him as a part of our group here and there on some movies down the road. So if you like Justin, continue to listen. He'll be joining us for a few future podcasts. All right, everybody. My new catchphrase. Everyone ready? Ken?
Yeah,
Ted?
drum roll.
Yeah. Good night, and have a pleasant tomorrow.
See you at the movies.
See you next time on Hooked on Movies.